Okay, today I've billed this as a relationship Q&A. So we'll get to that in a minute. But first, I want to see if someone would volunteer to be co-host, just in case I get dropped off the internet. That's been happening more and more in my location. So anybody want to just raise your hand and be willing? Okay, Sarah, thanks. Now I just have to find you in the participants. Oh, I know what you can do. Um, no, I'm not sure that works. Never mind. I'm gonna I'm gonna find
I
Sarah.
can request, can't I? I
Can
think.
you request?
I don't know, but
I,
we'll
I
see.
remember I remember there's a way. I don't see Sarah here. There must be oh, here she is. Okay,
Tell me.
more, and make co-host. Whoops, I wait, cancel. Okay, so you're co-host now, and I'll usually come right back on if I get bumped off. But
Okay.
I always like to have a plan B.
Yes, it's a good
My
idea.
my personality. So I want to say a few words about where I'm at and where I'm coming from today, and then we'll get into the Q&A and even comments and things like that here. So for the last few months, everything that I do, whether it's with friends or in a professional setting like this, I do it in the background of the pain and confusion and fear that's going on in America today about political situation. So that's always the background now. It's not what I'm going to talk about today, but I want to just let you know that in that context, I think uh, there's a lot. No, really, I'm hearing of a lot of people being hurt by some of the decisions of the current administration, and even more people in real fear, even like leaving the country. So that affects me. Um, so it's just a different atmosphere that I'm feeling in our world. And there's, of course, there's been the climate crisis for a long time that has been a background for me, but not so much in the foreground for most people. So I'm thinking, whatever the outcome, we still need relationship skills. We still need honesty skills to know how to discern and speak the truth. And we certainly still need compassion, and we need to keep developing our self-knowledge so that we can see reality more clearly and not have it be blinded by false, programmed into us kind of stories and values. And related to self-knowledge, we still need to be able to work on our trigger reactions so that we can bring more love and compassion to those tender parts, those afraid parts that may be showing up right now. So we'll probably get back more into some trigger work as we go along here, because that is also the context in which I work, is how to work with anything that's unpleasant that comes your way in a way that enhances your ability to have self-compassion and self-knowledge. So, um, with that, I want to just start with people putting in the chat. So if you can, you know how to open your chat? I have mine open here. And just put something in the chat about how are you doing? You could also put one of a question that you may have for me later on, but I'm going to read some of the things that show up in the chat here. So just how are you doing? In your personal self, with the world, you may not be looking at things from the angle I'm looking at it from. So I'm not assuming there's any like one answer that's going to become a theme here or anything like that. Um, when thought I was going to do this sort of open conversation today, I remembered how we had fires here in Sonoma County. Some of you live here about 5 or 6 years ago. And I know my partner and I had to evacuate, and there were other people who had to evacuate. And many of us, like the people in LA, didn't know what was going to become of their homes, and many people were definitely very affected by the fires. And when my partner and I would go out to a coffee shop or be walking down the street, everybody was just saying, "How are you doing?" It was such a lovely time in Sonoma County. At least that was my generalization. And everybody wasn't saying that, but it just seemed like we were all kind of a community. This crisis brought us more into the awareness that we need each other. And so that's kind of the spirit that I'm asking this question from. How are you doing? Because maybe some of us are feeling threatened in some way. So I'm going to see if we've got anything in the chat here. Hmm. So I'll read some of these. Barbara likes to ask, "How are you doing?" to keep her connected to her own feelings. Arthur says, generally irritable, numb, or annoyed, distraught, off, and somewhat hopeless. Yeah, thank you. As the world seems to go deeper into the underworld, personally, I'm coming out of oops, it went away, lifetime of the underworld. So I'm feeling hopeful, empowered, trusting, and scared. Yeah. See, like reminds me of me, I feel so blessed and so grateful, and I've got the best life ever right now. Okay. And then I'm surrounded by, I'll just say a world that's either in pain or in denial. It's my judgmental thought there. As a Canadian, I'm very worried about the situation. Yeah, Sarah, I hear this from a number of Canadians, like, we thought you were our friend. Um, Trying new things, helping me understand the habits that I found myself in with regard to the secure attachment or lack thereof. Okay, that flipped down to Dusty. I was quoting from Sarah, and then my computer just went to a different place. So thank you for those. I'll just kind of pause with that. But this is helpful. And there is a range. And we do have our multiple feelings. So I'm not going to focus on that during this webinar, basically. I just want that as a kind of opening to get a little more connected to our hearts and to each other, because this whole relationship Q&A is about supporting each other, witnessing each other, possibly myself at least, trying to offer a new angle on things or guide you to feel your feelings more deeply. So it's not, some of it'll be advice. I don't mind giving advice, but some of it'll be let's feel what you feel and see where that goes. Uh, and I'll uh, invite you to tell me if you want to look more deeply or if you just want advice. So that's fine. And comments. So I'm going to ask for questions, but also comments are okay too. Any kind of comment at all that's present for you. And maybe I'll comment on it, and maybe somebody else will comment on it, or maybe it'll just be your offering to the space today. So another thing I want to do during this, so it would help if quite a few people have your screen on. If you choose not to do that, that is your choice. I don't require that at all. But sometimes when I have a conversation with someone about their question, I'll have an intuition that, this is probably true for a lot of people here. A lot of us may have something similar going on. And I will ask for like a show of hands. How many people can resonate with what she or he is asking, and then you know just show of hands. So I'll let you know when I'm going to do a show of hands, and if you don't have your screen on, you could just elect to turn your screen on for that. or not. Okay. Any comments or questions at this point? And how we're going to do that is let's use the Zoom hand, the little yellow hand. You know how to raise your hand here? It's, I don't even see. Where is it? Can somebody see where it is? Because I don't even have how to raise my hand here.
If you're on a computer, it might be under reactions. Like if you tap the reactions
Mhm.
button, the raise hand option.
Yeah, that's where it is. And raise hand is right under there. And I don't know if it's on a cell phone. I'm not sure. So you, Dusty has a question. Does anybody, before I respond to Dusty, does anybody have trouble knowing how to raise your Zoom hand there?
I don't. I was just practicing raising my hand.
Look, if the Zoom hand doesn't work for
It
you,
worked.
it worked. Oh, good, good. I always have to keep relearning these things because it changes some. Okay, Dusty, tell me and unmute.
I actually don't have a question. I was practicing the raising hand, but I could go into launch into something.
Okay, good.
Let me hang on a second.
Or I could go to Barbara first and
Yeah,
you
go to
come back
Barbara.
to you. Want me to do that? Okay,
Yes.
Barbara.
Good morning, everyone. Recently, Susan, you talked about in one of your newsletters about the aspect of being aware of judgment
Mhm.
in communication, and it just feels so important now. In like all of my conversations, it seems like to be really aware of where I'm coming from. Yeah.
Yeah,
So I'm just
I can
bringing that up
I can
because
comment. Yeah,
more, yes, I'd love to hear more
yeah,
about that because it's just seems more present than ever for me.
yeah, yeah. So when you're in a judgmental space, and I'm pretty sure we've all been there, uh, sometimes your judgments are like valid factually, but I like to use every reaction like that, every reaction that's got some kind of edge of pain or rejecting what is. Anytime you kind of reject what's coming at you, I like to use it for self-inquiry. So if you be, and we could do this together. And Barbara, you could maybe think of a judgment that you have. Maybe they're all flooding in. In a way, I get a bunch of them, but and as I have that judgment, what's my actual experience in my body? What is the content of the judgment? And what do I feel when I kind of say that to myself? And and often there's a story around the judgment, like that person is misinformed, that person is materialistic. There's different kinds of judgmental thoughts. Would you care to speak one, Barbara, or would you just rather have me do a generic kind of a response here?
Well, I can default to my discussions with my family in Ohio
Oh,
as one
good.
example.
Yeah, that's a
How do we have these, can we have these difficult conversations, which we really haven't gone into in the past?
Mhm.
um, how to step in, how can I step into those in a way where I'm not bringing this judgment that I know is there and has been there for a long time. Um, but that would apply to other conversations with other people who have differing beliefs,
Yeah,
in whatever political, religious, spiritual, whatever they may
yeah,
be, the
yeah.
different ones. What's important that I be aware of within
Mhm.
myself when I begin that conversation, almost because I can feel it happening
Yeah,
right as soon as
It's good to have a little self-reflection before. And my first self-reflection question to anyone who feels drawn to engage with like a family member or several who have a different political angle on things or watching different movies, let's say, why are you doing that? What what is your true motive for doing that? And some will say, well, I'm just naturally curious. Or some would say, I really want to try to build a bridge here and see if they can hear me and I can hear them, even if we don't ever like agree. So and some are I want to do my part in spreading truth or something like that. You need to look first at what kind of like why would you want to do that? Seriously, I mean, I'm not criticizing that motive. I do it. I do it for genuinely wanting to know this other person and understand them. I mean, I'm talking about my well, I'm going to just say one of my relatives. I don't think I want to say which one. Um, I do not, in my own case, I do not do it to try to be heard. Um, that's just, I feel that's hopeless, frankly. Um, but I'm so committed to self-knowledge and knowing how different people view things that that's enough of a value for me to want to do it. And I'm in email correspondence with somebody right now who started to write to me, just somebody who's read my newsletter, and we're on different sides, and I, it's easier to have a respectful dialogue over email than in person, I think. But we're really learning how each other thinks. I ask her what her sources are. She sends me links, that sort of thing. So the first question, why would you want to do that? And some of us just think, well, we should. I want you to examine that a little more for the self-knowledge that that might bring. Might be I just can't stand this difference between us. And that would be good to share, It hurts me that we love each other, but now there's this big divide between us. So that's what comes to me. You could also see, I'm assuming that you, you, Barbara, kind of believe your judgments in a way. And let's just all be careful about that. I think under ordinary circumstances, other than what you named, Barbara, but just the ordinary daily life judgmental thoughts that we have about how a friend is doing her life, let's say. Um, if that's the judgment I'm talking about, that might be a little more about me. I always like to ask, what's it to you? And making like personal judgments that don't have to do with the difference in facts. Um, those have a little more potential for getting us in touch with our triggers. Like, okay, she's talking in stereotypes about men. This has actually been true of me a long time ago. She's talking in all these stereotypes about men. Men are bad, women good, men bad, and all this stuff. And I'm a bit triggered by that. Uh, but what's it to me? No, where does it touch me? And I think where it touches me is any kind of when I was very small, I saw people in kind of irrational conflict, basically my grandmother and my aunt. It wasn't my parents, but I would see my grandmother and my aunt having arguments where they would just throw words at each other. It was like they were big babies to me. But then I go, well, that's my beloved grandmother, and she's acting like a big baby. And it kind of, I remember it as little kind of a trauma. Like I can't always respect other adults, not other adults, although I felt more adult than her sometimes. Uh, I can't always respect adults. And so it was sort of a fall from grace. I'm thinking I'm about 4 years old at the time of this. So just realizing you can't always trust the big people. And actually, I'm just kind of back feeling that 4 year old right now. So these may not be like deep wounds. This hasn't actually wasn't a real deep wound for me, but it was a bit of a childhood trauma, we could say. Anybody else? Barbara, you want to comment or add anything to your question?
No, not really, but you're touching on the whole idea of bringing our own trauma, our own PTSD,
Yeah,
whatever, as part of the response. That seems really important to
yeah,
know enough about our own, right?
yeah. And so the way we do that, and I almost always approach whatever you're having a judgment about. You start with just feeling your feelings and then breathe and make an open space just through your breath. Just make a more open, spacious, compassionate place inside yourself. And that comes with simple breathing practices where you have a real slow exhale and where you intentionally relax your body, feel your seat on the chair you're sitting in. It's just like when you have full, present, centered sense awareness and the breath kind of connects you into that, you naturally become more spacious for whatever arises in your awareness. So then you see different things, you feel different things. Like you'll feel pain, like pain in my heart, or kind of a tightness in my solar plexus. So you'll notice those kind of things. That's very important to be able to start with a judgment and then just go watch the feelings and sensations. And then you'll see words like, I'm afraid you're not gonna, I remember a friend of mine recently, his father said, you're not going to amount to anything. He's a 12-year-old boy and those words are still with him. So a lot of his judgments also have to do with not also because mine was irrational authority and his issue is punishing authority, afraid of men. He goes around through his life kind of afraid of other men, preferring the company of women and so forth. uh, so he'll have a judgment about some man and how they're doing their assertion, and it'll go back to the pain of his father and his father's words. And then he can bring tenderness. When he sees that, he can bring tenderness and compassion to that tender, weak feeling. We kind of like to turn away from the feeling weak, but that vulnerable part of him. And doing this inner work, I call it whole making. I've talked about that in the book From Triggered to Tranquil, and I have a chapter on getting triggered by the world situation, in which I describe a few cases where somebody was, angry at the polarization, and then following it down to a deeper childhood series of memories, not just one. So always start with inquiring and doing this compassionate self-inquiry. Always start with that. And then whether you're factually right or not, uh, now you have a little bit better sense of where you're coming from. And probably then you can clarify, why do I want to do this? Why do I want to talk with this person? Your motives will become more clear. And you'll you'll be more present when you have the conversation. It doesn't mean it's all about you and you should just do the inner work, but you'll have a better basis for deciding, uh, is this all mine? Or now I'm clear the link between why that person's behavior triggers me. So I'm clear on that now. I've done at least some work on that. It takes lots and lots of this inner inquiry to get good at it. Some people have a real tough time accepting those tender parts of them that always get me into trouble in relationships. You know, some of us can identify with that. Anybody else got a, well, let's go back to Dusty.
Okay, so here I am. I had an original question. It's somewhere else now because what this spurred on was about childhood trauma, and is it always fear-based, or can there be like happy childhood trauma, like childhood trauma that results in happiness? That's one kind of side question, but part of that is because of my own behaviors of like people pleasing and excuses for bad behavior, trying to self-soothe my own self. And I have to admit, I was raised by puppies. So it's like, I'm gonna be like this people pleasing, wag my tail kind of person. And so is it fair to, I guess I'm trying to, not give out excuses for somebody else's bad behavior and what is mine and what's theirs. And also like the habit of bracing myself, knowing that someone hasn't dealt with their own shit, excuse me, but I'm the one who has to do my adjustments to whatever the situation is to hold the relationship. And out of that question comes like, when or if do you let go of the relationship? Because it's become so, I've become target practice in one relationship that I had, and I don't want to be that person anymore. And that person is related to me.
Yeah.
And so, when is it that place where you just say, look, I can't, anymore.
Well, this is about boundaries.
Yeah, but I feel bad and I want to repair it. I want to do the thing, but I feel like I'm doing all of the work and the other person is just sort of doing the habitual behaviors that they're doing. So I know
you have to ask the question, which is more important. First, you have to be honest about its effect on you. You're being honest in words, but to really feel the effect on you of being the target for somebody else's target practice, so I won't work with you on that right now, but I can suggest, you just feel what every time, make a commitment to notice your tendency to make excuses or to say, well, these are my family, or we've been together a long time. Notice all your mental excuses for not feeling how it's really affecting you. And when you truly be with and for yourself, you'll know when to mark a boundary. It's like, if this is hurting, I always just say, if this is hurting my health, if this is hurting my sleep, if I'm not able to learn from this relationship anymore, it's time to change the rules of the relationship. You may not banish them from your life, but you may very much limit the contact. And some people will say, I mean, I remember cutting off a relationship, and I didn't tell him all the reasons. I just said, I don't trust the way you think anymore, because he owed me a lot of money and so forth. And he was making up shit about what was real. So I just said, I don't trust the way you think, and I don't want to associate with you anymore. That was very cold, but in this case, I could accept this. And this had been somebody I'd been very, very close to. But I have no regrets about that. It was a total waste of my energy to try to get through to him. So I said goodbye to the money, rather than have to engage in that kind of thing. Anything coming up for you as we talk, Dusty?
Well, I mean, what comes up is that it challenges my expectations and what I thought were my values of like family, and what I thought were because I think I'm having this expectation of the other person or the, the situation. And I'm sort of challenged to rewrite my projections. Make them
Yeah.
good, but make them real. Um,
Yes.
yeah, I do a
Just to
lot
be
of
clear,
grief, feel a lot of sadness.
one of your projections is this having to do with this belief that if we're family, we must be connected, that sort of thing.
Yeah, and we put up with each other's stuff because we
Yeah.
come from the same cloth. So it's like I have this whole, you know, thing in my head
Yeah.
that we have to live by this creed, and it's my own. It's
Good to
like the
notice that.
probably doesn't even know.
That's very important to notice that and go deeply into, well, where does that come from? And a
Mm.
lot of it comes from the culture. In fact, I'd like to pause here and see a show of hands. Are there any other people here? I'm not assuming there are necessarily, but who now or have been holding that story, we're family, so we got to stay connected. Anybody just to see? And the people who are not on screen could also just raise your Zoom hand. I think that'll work. So, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, quite a few. No, quite a few. In the recording, the hand raising doesn't show up. So, that's why I'm trying to summarize. Okay, there's like 5 hands that I saw. Okay, back. So you're questioning this, Dusty, this belief that is so common in our culture and among even people here.
I am I'm questioning the belief, and I like your question about where does it come from, because I'm not the only one, and not that I'm going to blame somebody, but I get to rewrite it. I mean, there's a little bit of freedom, but there's also a lot of sadness and heaviness that I'm feeling. I feel like this huge weight just like
Yeah.
grounded me in the reality of it,
Yeah.
and I don't wanna, I just feel like I don't want to lose this relationship. It's like it's so challenging. It's taken a lot of energy, and I have given it a big break, but it's sort of there. It's like the little devil on my shoulder that's following me all the time, going, well, what about this? Don't let
Yeah.
it hang, you
Yeah.
know?
Well, I would encourage you, Dusty, to give it your best shot first and not necessarily to cut it off. And when I say give it your best shot, there's one of the truth skills called sharing mixed emotions, which is designed to make bad news easier to deliver. And that would look something like, I'd like to talk to you about where we're at in terms of our relationship at this stage, because we've been family for so long and we see each other and I think kind of have affection on some level for each other. So what I'm going to say might create more stress or might create stress. But on the other hand, I feel like I respect you enough to tell you where I really am at with regard to our relationship. Something where you connect with the other person before delivering the bad news. And then you're stepping into the unknown now when you start this conversation. Sometimes I have a thought that you don't see my needs when we're having a talk, or whatever your truth is there, you say it, but you say it as, sometimes I think you bring a little more of the observer as you describe something instead of, you don't seem to, instead of this, you don't seem to get me. Oh, that's an accusation. But if you stay on your own side of the net, this is one of the big practices in getting real. Talk about your own feelings. Or if you're going to talk about thoughts or even judgments, you say, and sometimes I have the thought that. So you're observing your judgment. You're not attached to being right. That's extremely important in any difficult conversation. And so you describe your current state and acknowledge that there is a relationship here. And then I'd like to know how that lands for you, is your next move. And that's where it takes courage. And that's where you got to shut up then and listen, because when when we think we're about to hear something difficult, there is one of these things I call control patterns where you keep talking. You ask a question, but you keep talking, you keep explaining yourself, or, and I don't mean this, qualifiers. Watch that. That ruins everything, you know.
Mm.
But if you do notice yourself in one of those control patterns, pause. It's good to know what your different control patterns are. That's key in the self-awareness work that I teach, is getting curious, like after the fact, going, oh my God, I was in a pattern. Uh, I get defensive at the drop of a hat. You know, defensiveness is one of the most common patterns. Over explaining yourself, over talking. Those are some, but I've got videos on that, or blogs on that. Just kind of search. You can probably search AI. What would Susan Campbell say about control patterns? I've done a little of that myself, and I get pretty good answers for what Susan Campbell would say. Okay. So yeah, I mean so I'm urging you to, like, that's what I'm calling, give it your best shot. And then you'll know more. Maybe you'll be surprised if you're more, coming from an honest but connected place. And you have to do that inner work first, to get yourself, I would say the inner work really is to get yourself more comfortable with emotional discomfort. That's the whole thing about trigger work, is you become a inwardly stronger and more resilient person if you can look honestly and feel with your own traumatic memories, or maybe they're not what you consider traumatic, but just some kind of pain or insecurity in there. And you can find that. And it doesn't have to be a specific memory, but just find that complex of feelings and hold it inside, be with it like a much loved child. That's the whole idea. And then you become more able to have difficult conversations with whoever. Good luck.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. All right.
Anyone else want to offer something? Angela, yes.
Well, I have a question, but I also have seen in the chat, and there have been a couple questions.
Oh,
So I'll wait and see if you want to answer those, and then uh, I'll go after that if there's time.
okay. Deborah has one. So let me see who else. Arthur, Barbara. Okay. Let me take yours, Angela, and then I will go with those.
Thanks, Susan.
I need some time to kind of process those.
Okay. Um, well, I just love uh, this work around opposites and
Mhm.
uh, how I've learned from you around holding polarity. And for me in my own life, it seems right now like I've done these practices forever, and Gestalt work and holding the differences together, the both and. But it seems like right now something is happening where energetically, if it feels much more available to me for the integration to be happening, and like more of a sense of bliss around things coming together that have inside myself been so
Mhm.
polarized. And I don't know if it's just me, or it seems like the world, there's a potential with all the chaos and the divisiveness, there's a potential to actually come together more for some kind of spiritual awakening for humanity. And so I'm wondering if you want to say anything about that, but my particular question is around like maybe some of the real nugget things you've learned in your beautiful career and life around like the practices that really support that integration of the opposites? Like for me, I hold both at the same time. I just rest with my awareness with both, and I let them do their thing when I get out of the way and I witness, like the miracle of life,
Yeah,
handles it all.
yeah,
So just curious about your
yeah.
learning there. Thank you
Um,
so much.
yeah, you gave a real good articulation of the process of holding differences. Uh, I'll, I'll, I have an example in one of my books of a couple who one wanted to be monogamous. I mean, they had been married already for a while, but then one wanted to stay. They had been stay monogamous, and the other didn't. Okay, so uh, he didn't want to be monogamous, and she did, and they didn't want to break up. And I got them each looking deeper into why and the basic process and then outcome. First, the process was, you know, don't rush to try to integrate these.
Mhm.
Be with the difference. And what it means is I want myself to have what I want. This is a self-other difference, Angela, and yours might be something else, but that I want me to have what I want and need, and I truly want you to have what you want and need. Uh, so he had just come into being kind of a hot man. I mean, he'd been a wallflower all his life, but now that he was with her, he kind of blossomed, and a lot of other people, women were interested in him. And he said, I just can't, I've hardly had any other partners, I just can't like go to my grave without exploring this part of my masculinity. I mean, and she had empathy for that. She understood his history, but she also that's not going to work for me. I can't. I just maybe I'm even she'd say maybe I'm even too secure. I mean, too insecure, I should say, to um to be okay with that. And so they held that difference. They each still cared about each other. And see, that's the thing. First, we have to get the idea that differences don't have to separate you. Oh, so that's the first, you just need some kind of model of, no, there is a way for things to move, but they kind of move on their own. It was kind of like what you said, Angela. You hold those differences, and they were still in counseling and still trying to be heard the way people always want to do, be heard. And they really also wanted to hear, and it's like they digested both sides within themselves. They could feel the push pull, and they lived with that. And the outcome was that they each realized that what they thought they wanted was a symbol of something else. I don't want to go into all the details, but it wasn't exactly, no, I want monogamy or I want non-monogamy. It had to do with her getting inwardly more secure by kind of fantasize. I mean, this is one interpretation that was her interpretation by fantasizing that I could live without him. It wasn't I want to, but I could. So she got a little more inwardly uh, centered. And
Mhm.
his big thing was being able to be accepted and loved as different. And he was through that. So you really, when you hold differences for a while, and this is the part about expanding your capacity to feel emotional discomfort, that can lead to all kinds of wonderful things. But it does take some kind of practice that you take on intentionally. It doesn't just happen from like reading a book or hearing me talk about it. So take
I'll
this.
I'll just add to that, Susan. That's so great. There were so many, pieces in what you just said, and then I just got inspired to add. I've noticed over the years when I do that practice inside, not because I've wanted to, but because I've been dragged to. Like, I'd rather eat bonbons, but no, you're going to the underworld. But when I have had to do that, what has helped me is this organic grounding that has come in. Like, when you just let things unfold, somehow eventually, for me in my system, when that bit of grounding comes in of whatever is the difficulty, that's where I then have the tolerance. I can handle whatever. And yeah, so I'll just end there. I know there's a lot of questions, but thank you so much.
Thank you for that question. So Arthur has a question. I'm going to read. Is it okay, Arthur, now if I read this question out loud?
Well, you can, but Chase actually had to skedaddle because he's
Ah,
a teacher and he had class, and so
ah,
probably
maybe,
I wouldn't want to do it without him here.
I get it.
Uh,
Oh, that
so
would be so great though, to actually do something with a real life partnership here. Well, thank you for trusting me enough to put that in the chat, and thanks to Charles too.
yeah, I mean, I think we would probably be open to it another time if you wanted to do another
Yeah,
one of
I'll
these.
probably do another relationship Q&A next month. I haven't fully decided, but I think I'll do another one of these. I'm enjoying this. It kind of stretches me in ways. I learn things, and of course, it's all about me. That's my inner witness, says Susan. It's always all about you. But that's my humorous self-talk right now.
Sounds good. Well,
So come
we
back
can
next month
yeah,
with Charles if you can.
Chase. Yes,
Chase, got
yes.
it. Nice name. Hmm. Deborah, where are you? I want to just see if I see. Ah, hi, Deborah. Is it okay if I read yours, or do you want to speak?
Go ahead and read it.
Okay. I've been feeling vulnerable and alone. I've tried to grow some of my friendly relationships into something deeper, but without success. I'm very community oriented and show up when a request is thrown out for help. I'm a big volunteer. Years back, I was very involved in a congregation and was truly surprised that when I let them know I needed help, no one showed up. I have many superficial relationships and no family around me. Not sure where I'm going with a question for you, but perhaps you have a direction you can take. I'm going to say with this, I think it was my. So, first, I just want to acknowledge what I'm feeling right now, which is the impact of that, and attempting to put myself over there in your shoes. Um, it occurs to me, how would I deal with that if that were me? And I'm being Deborah now, my version of Deborah, and I, I, I reach out. I'm there for people. I don't just hide in my room. I make an effort, but nothing quite seems to gel in the area of close relationships. And this feels kind of lonely. Is that, are you feeling, how are you feeling? Kind of lonely?
Yeah, thank you for speaking it. That's how it feels.
Yeah. Um, this would be a first would be a deep, and this might be hard, but a deep befriending of these feelings in yourself, which means sort of intentionally setting aside time to realize that your circumstances, painful as they are probably, I'm going to make a guess here, are probably a signal that there's even deeper pain inside of you of some sort, some false belief that got into you or about relationships or something, some experience when you were very young and impressionable, perhaps, or in your teen years or somewhere where you you got some kind of uh, fearful or negative impression about relationships or about yourself or your ability to be loved and that sort of thing, uh, you might need assistance with this, actually, a guide to work through this with you because there's more pain under there. I'm um, taking a big leap to say, but I want to encourage all the people who are listening because so many of us would go, why would I want to feel that deeper pain? I mean, wouldn't that just like re-traumatize myself? That's why you need care to go slowly into the memories if there are some there. And slowly, you have to do this many times. Just dip in. Wow, there's something back there. Uh, because you are very likely a pretty rational person. Like, why is this happening to me? But uh, there's this emotional pain that has to do with coming to terms. I talked about this in one of my blogs, coming to terms with the hand you were dealt, and not just intellectually, but dipping into the old pain until you felt enough of it so that you're not as guarded in relationships. There's probably some way that you're giving off, not through any intentionality on your part, but just giving off something that is static in the connection between yourself and others. Uh, is anything that I'm saying making any sense to you, Deborah? Because I just went way out on a limb here.
It does make sense. I don't have any answer to it, but it does make sense on a intuitive level.
Mhm.
And I've only recently discovered that I have some neurodivergent stuff going on, some ADHD, some early childhood trauma, and
Mhm.
then recognized that my brother may be on the spectrum, was never diagnosed. I mean, I'm starting to see it now in my family, and I'm
Uh-huh.
realizing we may all have stuff that's not been named or understood. And if that's the what's the word? Like the lens that I'm seeing
Yeah.
through,
Yeah.
I'm not getting a clear um, view.
Yeah. And that sort of if we can just any kind of neurodivergence or there's such a variety or different attention deficit type of things. Any of that is kind of like static of some sort between yourself and others, uh,
Uh-huh.
through no fault of your own. And our society hasn't learned how to deal very well with anybody other than uh, certain types of human contact. And there are other types of ways of making contact that um, just because something is normative, then that's what we are able to do. I'm not able to carry on a good conversation with somebody if I don't like get them in the first 10 seconds. You know what I mean? And it might have taken the adults in your world or your peers a little more time to, for you to be gotten. And maybe you weren't in certain ways, you and your brother and anyone who considers themselves neurodivergent. There's a little bit of loneliness in there with most of the people who identify the way you've described,
Hmm.
even when there's people all around. But this is not my experience. I don't know much about this, frankly. Although I do have very good friends who are ADD, and some of them have a hard time expressing themselves for whatever reason. But it's usually that the teachers in school didn't get them, and so they never were really listened to. So there's going to be some deficits in your learning back there, which can, it creates insecurity. People, I'm just guessing somewhere along the line, people didn't get you. Did you feel any of that?
I think I worked really hard to not just conform, but to excel.
Uh-huh. Good.
And
That's a
even
good
that may
company.
be sort of off-putting for
Well,
others.
it could be, because it was something, there was still some kind of static in there that
Mhm.
is in your unconscious.
Mhm.
It's hard for me to just bluntly, say to people, there's something in your unconscious, because that makes people feel kind of hopeless. Well, don't tell me that. Oh, it makes
No,
me
but your
feel bad.
comment about dive into it is
Yeah.
to know it, to understand it from all sides, and to
Mhm.
understand yourself is to accept and love yourself. So it really is crucial.
Yes, that's right. Understand and love yourself, because there's a good mother archetype in all of us that knows exactly what we need. I mean, I've studied this through getting to know various clients who had extremely traumatic backgrounds. And once you tune in to your own feelings while witnessing and feeling with all these feelings that are coming up, you become more whole. You go, there's that, and you shed tears, you feel feelings. I do en- encourage people to come out of it if it's just like bad for you. You're crying for like 5 hours or something. You can safely cry for an hour, but I think you gotta put a lid on it somewhere. So don't go anywhere where you can't get yourself out of.
Mhm.
And that requires trial and error, and so sometimes you might overdo it, your sadness or so forth. But just like really being willing to be with whatever's coming up, that will make you a more whole person and more accepting of whatever's behind you, whatever happened. So, Deborah, you're coming to terms with the hand you were dealt.
Mhm.
And I think that's a very big developmental accomplishment that everyone needs to do. Yeah.
Thank you.
And look at that, we're at 11 a.m. Pacific time.
Yep.
And so I just want to have a couple of collective breaths and some appreciation for you guys who are on this call. So I'm just looking around. And I just want to say thank you very much for showing up today. And if you have comments or feedback on this one, I would love to hear it, because I haven't done that many of these relationship Q&A things, but I think I want to do another one next month. So if you have any encouragement or feedback that I should run it a little differently, let me know. Email me at drsusan@susancampbell.com, or you can find that at my website. All righty. Thanks for showing up the way you did.
Thank you, Susan.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you, Susan.
Bye, Susan. Thank you. Good to see you.
Thank you. Yeah.